procedure on how to basically set up and tune the Wilfley table to get perfect heavy minerals off of this thing almost every time. So the first thing is everything's been washed and then dried. So the table, this little funnel system, even the green buckets. So make sure everything is clean before you go through this process. But we're going to show you at the end of the video for those that it doesn't matter. First thing is we want to set up a foil boat to capture our heavy minerals. So we use basically commercial kitchen grade foil, and I like to pull off about 3 feet of this stuff. So come out about 3 feet, cut it off, and then with your foil, fold it perfectly in half. And so this is our disposable aluminum boat that allows us to capture zircon and then toss it. So there's no chance of contamination. So I literally folded it in half and then double folded this little hem here, this little seam. And this gives us more of a resilient drip edge on the edge of our Wilfley table. Next, you want to take that foil boat that you just made and you want to thread it in between the edge of the Wilfley table, the far edge where all the heavies are going to travel, and then this funnel tray system. And so that little hem that we set up here is going to go on that side of the tray with the hem basically on the bottom. So threading that under, and this is where it's nice to have everything dry, because if this is wet, it's going to get stubbed and it's going to fight you. So that's threaded. Now let me show you how to make a cavity in this so you can actually get more material in this before it wants to wash off either of the ends. We come in so we have about 1 inch basically hanging off of the back of that, and then a couple inches hanging off the front of here. And then what you do is you want to push, make sure not to tear the foil, but you want to push it down, basically give yourself some space if you're going to have a big sample running. And then once you have a little bit of space down here, you can fold over the edge there, push this thing down so it's not perfectly flat, because if this is perfectly flat, water's going to run on the outside edge. And then basically do the same back here, so slightly below the surface of this tray, and then it allows basically big room for storage of material here, and it runs off basically both ends without dumping off the edge of the tray. Something that I like to do, and it might be difficult to see in this video, but I like to bend a double lip on this. So the double lip is basically so if water comes off the edge, it doesn't run underneath this boat back that way. And so what I do to accentuate is I bend it up and then down. So when it drips off, it drips straight off. It doesn't dribble out here, because we're not going to have a bucket underneath back here. We're only going to have a bucket catching the edge of this. So you can actually see that I basically made it go up and then down the edge. So when it drips completely off, and it won't run underneath the foil boat. Next, we put our washed green buckets underneath each one of these little funnel systems in the tray. So there's one here that comes out, there's one here that comes out, so those 2 buckets are going to catch that. And then all the way down at the clay end, so where all the lights basically come right off the table, we're going to have a clean bucket down here. Even though these buckets have been washed, they're still old and they have scratches. So if you want to actually save the material that comes off of the Wilfley table into the buckets, you probably want to put a plastic liner. So even though I don't really care about saving this stuff for this sample because we just want the zircons, I'm going to show you what we do. So these are just pieces of brand new garbage bag. And you can actually just shove them into these buckets and line them, and so that everything is lined with either garbage bags or foil, brand new, so there's no chance of contamination. So there we go. We've got to make sure that they're big enough that it fills the bucket and actually makes it around the outside of the rim. So that one's ready to go. I also like to put these little aluminum boxes underneath the foil boat just as a safety measure. And so if something happens, if you're learning this procedure and you accidentally stab through the foil with a spoon, this will catch your sediment and save it. And since this tray has been washed, the chance of contamination is extremely low. But if it actually touches this lower tray, the chance of contamination is huge. So this basically is there for safety. Next thing we want to do is actually put our sample in the hopper. So just like with a pulverizer, what you want to do is get this bag, the top of the bag in first. So if you can get that all the way down, you can pour the sample in and make no dust. If you're starting this for the first time, make sure you grab a dust mask. They're on the shelves ready for that. But if you know what you're doing here, there will be absolutely no dust, and the sample will be perfectly ready for feeding on the Wilfley. So make sure you get both the corners of the bottom. Shake a little bit as you slowly pick up. So I can already see the sample starting to peek out of the bottom. And there we go. So the sample's out, no dust, and we can get this thing started. All right, table's all set up. Our sample's in the hopper. We're ready to start, but there's a couple things you got to make sure before you turn anything on. The first is that these valves, these water valves, the handles need to be perpendicular to the line of the pipe. That means they're shut down. And even though they're going to be old and a little leaky, it's going to slow down the water flow as much as possible so we can start our adjustments with a clean slate. The next thing we have to check is make sure this little needle valve here is turned off. We use this when we want to run a liquid sample on this hopper, but if it's a dry sample and you hit it with liquid, it makes your life miserable because water then goes up inside this hopper and you need to empty it, clean it out, and dry it before you can start again. So make sure that needle valve is shut off. Now that we're ready, I think we can turn the whole system on. To turn the water on, the main valve is this one, so turn that so it's in line with the pipe. And then we want to turn on the water to the Wilfley table. And you'll notice, since our valves are a little old, it's going to drip a little bit, but that's as low as we can get it to start it. If you want to turn the water onto the hose to wash stuff, it's this little valve over here. And so now you can see the little valves are in line with whichever pipes we're dealing with. Last thing in front of the Wilfley table is turning on the shaker. And so you do that by this switch here. You push up, literally like you have to push up and then open the lid this way. Push up, pull out, and then there's our switch to turn the thing on. So you flip that up, and now we have the table shaking and the water slowly running. Before we turn on the hopper, make sure the dials are 0. Flip the switch. We only adjust the feeder, and so we bring that up between 20 and 30. Go see how the feed rate is, come back, maybe adjust it a little bit more or a little bit less. But don't make big adjustments without going and looking at the front of the feeder to make sure that the feed rate is small enough. So here you can see the dry powder falling onto the table, and it's kind of conservative. I could go a little bit faster if I wanted to, but to get good separation, slower is better. So this, you can see, is hitting the table. Spray bar is going to get it wet, and then it's going to start working its way on the Wilfley. So now the sample is starting to hit the table. We need to bring the water up. Let me walk you through the plumbing here. And so the water comes in here, it's split off. This one going on the top goes across here, and it goes into the drip line that goes across the top of the table. The lower pipe comes across here, and it's into this spray line here that basically gets the dry sample wetted and start flowing onto the table. The system we have here is really rudimentary. If you're setting up your own system, do not use these dumb ball valves. Use a gate valve or a needle valve that allows you to really do sensitive adjustments. Because you're going to find out here, it's really tough to get a decent flow and then tweak it just a little bit here or there. But the way I do it is I start at 0 on both of those. We can see the drip is fine for now, but since we're coming off of a Y here, you adjust any one of these and it's going to change your pressure on the other side. And so what I like to do is, first, there's a huge amount of slack in this ball valve here. So starting at 0, I get rid of the slack, and then I tap on it a little bit until I see it move. And there it moved just a little bit. And once you've moved it, you want to make sure that you have decent water flow across the table. The key here is you don't want any big rivers running down the table. Big rivers pick up everything, including your heavy minerals, and wash them off the table. I like to get down really low so you can actually see the shine of the room lights on the surface of the Wilfley table to see what's going on across these grooves. Because the challenge is you want it flowing so that barely any of it makes it into our foil boat, but you don't want it flowing so fast that you get a really strong river coming straight off of one of these grooves. If you have a river, it's actually going to rip up your zircon and take it right off the table. So looking at that reflection of the room lights on the surface of the Wilfley table, I can then adjust the water flow for this spray bar, making sure not to get any rivers. So it's a little bit too strong. I'm not getting as much heavy stuff as I want on the boat, so I want to bring this down. But remember, you have to get rid of the slop, which means bringing it towards perpendicular until you feel that valve actually engage. And now that it's engaged, I want to lightly tap on that until I see it move just a little bit. And I go back to the Wilfley and see how it's adjusted. Hopefully you can see that most of our material is coming off right before the foil boat. We're still getting a good 10 to 20% that falls onto our foil boat. We actually want to be conservative and get more than we're going to take into Minsep, and then we can actually spoon it back onto the table to get rid of the amount we want and get exactly the right size to go down into Minsep. So you can see here, it's only been running for a couple minutes, but we're getting a decent amount of sediment down in our foil boat. You can actually see that it's doing some decent separation now that we've adjusted the water flow. So now we pretty much wait for most of the sample to pass through, and then we do the next step. You can see here that the spray bar is pretty well adjusted even though the valve is fully turned off. But you can also see that the feed of the hopper has actually changed a little bit. It's going to do that as the sample gets lower inside of that funnel. So I'm going to bring that down just a little bit. With the Wilfley table running, now we can actually start setting up our sieve. So in the cabinet, you get a big aluminum sieve tube and a giant hose clamp. And then down here on the countertop, we can get our sieve screens. And if this is empty, just talk to the manager of the raw room and we'll cut you some more. So even though we took these out of the cabinet and they should be clean, make sure you soap and water these every time to make sure that you're using something that's pristine, because you're going to put your sample in this, you don't want any contamination. So I just washed and dried this, and now we're going to put on the sieve. Working on your freshly cleaned table or on a new garbage bag, you can set your sieve tube. We have our hose clamp. We have the sieve that we just got out of that Tupperware, so it's brand new. So you put it over the tube, push your pipe clamp over that, and then this is the little tightener right there. So the next thing you need to get is either a flat screwdriver or this one with the socket in it. When you push that over that, then all you have to do is turn that, and that holds our sieve in place. Put a new garbage bag into one of these cans, using something to bridge the gap, like this freshly washed spoon. You can have the sieve sit on the can like that. And so it's hanging on the edge of the can there, and it's hanging on the spoon here. So this is what we're going to actually sieve the sample down from what ends up in the boat to what we want to keep. And so using one of these tablespoons that we just cleaned, we can scoop everything out of our foil boat and into our sieve tube. And so with the spray nozzle, you want to just do a light mist. If you get too aggressive, you're going to blow this stuff up out of the sieve. So start conservative, just using a spray. The spray actually acts like a shield, an umbrella that keeps everything down in the sieve. And once you see that most of the fine stuff has gone down, you can start getting more aggressive. until you're down to just a strong stream. And there you have it. So everything less than 450 microns gone down in there. If you're not very good at your spray nozzle control, you're welcome to use this little plexiglass cover that you'll put on top of the sieve and then put the nozzle in and spray around like that. I personally don't like it. More things to possibly have contamination, and I just have developed the spray technique to get everything through the sieve. So you can see that we're running out of sample. So what we're going to do is just spritz a little bit of water inside the hopper, and then spritz a little bit on the chute, and that allows you to get everything down. Next thing you'll notice is that there's some powder that is stuck around the back of the Wilfley table. So just using a really light spray, try and knock all that down, get it on the table, and move it across. Now we're going to shut everything down and basically try and capture everything else that's left. So turn off the shakes, turn off the table, turn off the water, turn off the hopper. We're basically going to use the hose. I'm using a very light little spray, like just that much. We're going to try and glean every last heavy mineral off the table. So starting up here, basically going to work our way over the entire table. This area down here doesn't matter much because this is where all the light clays came off. So you want to literally just go across the top of this and then down the front of that, all the way into the boat. So you're basically trying to just get all this stuff into the foil boat. And it's pretty surprising when you figure this out, you're doing it correctly, how many heavy minerals get pushed off of this last step. Everything now has gone into the boat. We're going to spoon it out, get all the sample out of the front of the boat. You can drain it off. Put it all into the sieve. Then depending on the condition of that foil boat, you might be able to reuse it, but if you were hard on it with a spoon, you might need a new one. Push everything through the sieve. What's actually left here in the sieve can get thrown into the waste barrel for sediment. So holding everything away from the ground, we can pour off the water that we just sieved with. So you want to make double sure that the bag does not touch the floor. So once we get enough water out, I actually pick up on the back, pour the rest out. Keeping an eye so you're not pouring out any sediment. So that's most of it. And so you can pull out the garbage bag, and there's all your sediment. And so what I like to do is grab that. We're going to cut this off. That gets thrown away. And now we can pour off just a little bit of water and then put this back on the Wilfley table. So we can actually just pour this onto our Wilfley table. I'm trying to go nice and slow with it. All right, so now the water's out. We're going to run this back through using the spoon. So the trick with this is literally just opening it up, grabbing a little bit with our spoon, And then lightly dabbing it across the top of the table. So now that we're dealing with sediment that's smaller than 450 micron, you want to throw on 1 spoonful and then watch how it behaves across the table. Things are going to be different now that it's a single size grain. So right away I can see a bunch of dense stuff trickling down our table. And the real question is, what's going to happen with all of this mass? Is it going to split off before our foil boat? Or is it going to go back onto our foil boat? Because we want to basically take that and split it into about 1/3. We only want like this little bit down here. So here you can see about 2/3 of the sediment is coming off and missing the boat. And the other 1/3 is trickling all the way down and ending up on the far end of the boat. So this is a decent separation. And since we're seeing that we're capturing so much of the dense stuff, we can basically run the rest of this across the Wilfley. So I'm going to take another spoonful and take it to the top. And this is the magic of the Wilfley table, because you can see here, you have your lighter quartz coming down here, your medium density, slightly mafic, and then your much denser and darker mafic trickle, basically working its way at the far end of this ladder. The way the Wilfley works, it's essentially your gold pan and it's been rolled out. So the grooves on the gold pan are essentially the same, but these go slightly uphill. And so the densest minerals stick to the bottom of this shaking table, and they can work their way uphill and trickle down to the edge. And so this is essentially a ladder where your densest minerals go over the edge and trickle their way to the far end. Anything that's less dense, if you've got your water adjusted correctly, is going to basically work its way straight off the table. So if you just lightly drag the spoon across the table, just enough sediment comes off of it. But you don't want to drag too hard because this will wear out the table. And you finish by letting it hit in the spray bar, and you watch it go down. All right, shut it down. So it's kind of a challenge. Oops, see, there's the challenge. Not going too big. But you should be able to see a ton of real mafic grains coming off of here. Rinse off our spoon. That'll get washed in a minute. So then you want to scoop everything back so you don't lose any of it. And you want to slowly pour it off. And there you have it. So I like to do a little bit of origami, where I just tuck the back there, tuck the front, like that, bring it up, and fold it like a sausage. And then I take that straight down to Minsep, get it drying, and get it ready for the fronds. So these get dumped. Even though we lined them, we just did that for the video. We're going to dump these into the waste barrel bucket for sediment. So when washing any of these buckets, there's a couple tricks to it. So first you rinse. So you rinse so everything falls straight down the sides. Keep it tipped totally vertical. And you rinse the inside so everything can fall straight out of the bottom. You never keep a bucket tipped and then dump it, because sediment will sink and then stick to the bottom. So we rinse it, and we soap it with a soapy sponge inside and out. Making sure to also get to the bottom. And then you do the thing again. So you rinse it in a way that whatever you're rinsing is completely vertical, so it falls straight out with the sediment suspended. And then the same thing underneath. So to reiterate, you do it so everything gets hit by the water and quickly falls straight out. The first thing on the Wilfley, give everything a strong rinse down and start from the top, which is our hopper. So we then rinse off the table with a jet. Then we rinse off the hopper table and the Wilfley table. Trying to get all the different surfaces. Then we rinse out the little tray. And then finally, we rinse off the lower tray. And this lower tray is designed really poorly. It has a really tiny drain, so you can't get all the sediment out. So you got to keep pushing the sediment from both sides until you can get it all out. But it's key to rinse off all the sediment before we start taking things off. All right, next thing is we have this little counterweight over here because we've lost one of the front holding pieces. Take the counterweight and we're going to rinse that off. Well, for now we're going to just set it out of the way. To get this skirt off, it's a little tricky, but you got to pick up and pull it kind of over to the left. And then with that off, we set this on the wall. Just lean it up against the wall. And then we do another power rinse. Starting at our hopper. Power rinse that. Power rinse the table for the hopper. From behind here, you want to actually get underneath the actual Wilfley table. So get underneath and try and get the water to flow down because some sediment can hang right along the lower edge of that. So getting the bottom of that Wilfley table and the top of the base of the Wilfley table, then the top of the fiberglass skirt. And then finally work our way on this lower skirt and get the sediment out. All right, with most of the sediment gone, now we can bring in the soap. So for this, we just are going to use this little brush and our soapy sponge. So first, clean on the top of the hopper. You want to make sure you cover all the surfaces with the sponge. Then we do the lower tray, the outside of the hopper, frame of the hopper. Do everything you can to make sure you've knocked all that sediment loose. Then we wring out our sponge to get soap onto the Wilfley table. We use this nylon brush to get all the grooves of the Wilfley table. And use the sponge to get underneath the drip line and the spray bar. And then finally the lower edge of the Wilfley. Then with the same sponge, we wipe down this entire fiberglass lower tray, including the bottom. So try to be systematic Start from the very top, work our way down the hopper, and then from the back side of the Wilfley, work our way down from underneath the Wilfley table to the base, underneath the base, and then finally the fiberglass skirt. And then in the front, go off the top of the Wilfley, and off the front of that skirt, and then finally that lower tray. Every time we're trying to get every bit of sediment out of this really tiny drain. Last thing to wash is that little skirt that we removed. So here you're just trying to use water pressure to blow out everything. And you'll notice where I lean this, because when you're spraying it, it's going to want to tip. So I put it between two things that are waterproof, and I made it so when it tries to tip, it can't fall down. Because you'll notice that this thing is all busted up from somebody trying to do this and then knocking it down with the water. So put it between two things, can't fall down. And then systematically try and just blow everything out. Once you've done the front twice, you lean it out, you do the bottom. And then just like with the Wilfley table, you scrub that, you soap it, you scrub it again, rinse it, and then it goes back into the Wilfley table. This tray back in. Again, it's kind of hard to figure it out the first time. So you want to make sure that it's all the way under the Wilfley table. And then you take that rinsed block, and this really is just a jaw crusher plate. And when you set that on the back, it keeps it in place. Last thing to do is, with compressed air, you're going to blow off the hopper so it doesn't rust, and the rest can just drip dry. And that's it for the Wilfley. And so the cleaning process you want to do before you use it and after you use it, because you want to leave it clean, but you don't know who used it, because sometimes you have people sneak in here in the middle of the night. They don't write anything down in the book, so you can't count on anything. So in this drawer by the door, we have a logbook. So you can see that basically in this logbook, we're writing down everything that's been done in here. But you also notice that sometimes people come in and they don't log in. That's a huge no-no. So we've done two things today. We both used the pulverizer with the same sample and the Wilfley table. And so we're going to log this in the book. Now that everything in the room is clean and I can leave it the way it is, sign in the logbook. I have a Ziploc baggie with both the clay fraction and the dense fraction. I'm now going to run this sample down the Minsep, and we're going to start doing the next procedures. Before you leave the rock room, make sure you hose down all the floors, any of the stools or ladders that you use, and make sure you get all the sediment into the drain down in the middle. I also wanted to give you a couple little pointers or tips on the Wilfley table. Things I've learned are, if it's a real quartz-rich sample, zircon being associated with quartz, you can be pretty aggressive. You know, you can take it down pretty small. If you're doing something extremely mafic, i.e. there's tons of either olivines or magnetite, anything that's really dark coming off a Wilfley table, you don't want to be as aggressive, because the fronds is going to take that out, or even the hand mag. And so sometimes if I just see a pure black stripe coming down the far end of the Wilfley, I'll triple my sample size, knowing that most of that's going to come off downstairs in Minsep. Because you don't want to get too aggressive here, and then down in Minsep, everything be removed by the fronds or the hand mags. Another big thing I've learned when either doing the Wilfley or with the gold pan is that if you have magnetite associated with whatever you're doing, realize that that can actually bump zircon out of the way. And so sometimes I'll actually be real conservative here, then I'll hand mag it out, just taking a little magnet, putting it in Ziploc, and then swashing the whole thing around. And then I'll re-Wilfley table that, because then with magnetite gone, it won't bump the zircon out. And so I can be assured that I'll get almost all my zircon off the Wilfley instead of something even heavier bumping it out of the way. This Wilfley table rides on a giant rod down the middle. If this thing really starts squawking, put a little bit of grease on your finger, pick the Wilfley up and actually push the grease underneath those saddles. There's one here and there's one there. If you can get those under the saddles, the squeaking will go away and you can get back to work. The last big warning is be careful of too much water on the Wilfley table. If you get little river streams running down the Wilfley table, that can take everything out, including zircon or anything else you want, like apatite. And so always check down low, looking at the reflection into the lights, and make sure you have no big rivers coming down, because that's a big game changer.